December 1944. The Moselle River lay ahead, cold and churning. A line of Patton's tanks gleamed under a gray sky. Engineers shook their heads. "Sir, it's impossible," they said. Bridges were destroyed. The riverbanks slick with mud. German artillery waited on the far side, ready to rip any crossing to pieces. Patton didn't flinch. He studied the water, the terrain, the reports stacked on his desk. Every logical calculation screamed to wait, to reroute, to pause. But George S. Patton was no man to follow logic over instinct. The men on the banks felt it, the tension, the fear, the impossible weight of the order. Some gripped their rifles tighter. Others stared at the river, already imagining the fire that awaited. Yet in that moment, Patton's presence carried a promise: boldness, speed, and a chance to shock the enemy. Across Europe, whispers of his audacity spread. And here, on a frozen riverbank, history was about to witness the impossible. Late 1944. Europe was in chaos. The Allies had stormed Normandy in June, yet the push through France had been brutal and slow. Patton's Third Army, a mechanized force of over 250,000 men, had cut through the Lorraine region with relentless speed, leaving German forces scrambling to regroup. Cities burned, railways destroyed, and entire divisions vanished in the wake of Patton's advance. But speed had a cost. Supply lines stretched thin. Fuel, ammunition, and replacement tanks lagged behind the moving columns. Winter was closing in. Roads turned to mud, rivers swelled from rain and snow. Engineers scrambled to repair destroyed bridges, but German forces anticipated every move, laying mines and fortifying the natural obstacles that could stop an advancing army. Patton's reputation preceded him. Known for audacity, decisiveness, and unyielding discipline, he inspired both fear and admiration. His subordinates knew one truth: when Patton wanted to move, no obstacle, natural or man-made, would delay him if he believed the risk was worth the reward. Yet this time the challenge was different. A wide river, no intact bridges, and heavily fortified enemy positions loomed ahead. Even his closest aides hesitated. Across the German lines, intelligence noted the American advance. Commanders expected Patton's mechanized fury, yet they also believed natural defenses would halt him. The Moselle River, flowing cold and swift, was considered impassable without proper bridging, an engineering nightmare under fire. For the Germans, the river was a chance to slow or even trap the Third Army. For Patton, it was another test of audacity and timing. Every decision mattered. Delay could allow the Germans to regroup. Too hasty a crossing could mean annihilation. The stage was set, the men ready, and the impossible was waiting to be attempted. The Moselle was no ordinary river. Wide, cold, and swollen from winter rains, it carved deep, uneven banks that made conventional crossings nearly impossible. Bridges had been destroyed or mined in strategic locations, leaving only the exposed waterway to conquer. Engineers studied it with grim faces. Every calculation suggested delay. Every plan warned of disaster. Patton's men knew the stakes. Crossing meant tanks, trucks, artillery, thousands of tons of steel, had to be moved across unstable terrain, often under the watchful eyes of German snipers and artillery crews. Bailey bridges, pontoons, and temporary crossings were options, but each required hours, if not days, to construct. Time they did not have. And yet Patton pressed forward. He demanded reconnaissance teams survey the banks, search for hidden fords, and assess every possible approach. Engineers argued, currents too strong, banks too soft, enemy fire too certain. Patton listened, but only briefly. His orders were simple: find a way or make one. Failure was not an option. The soldiers felt the tension before a single engine roared to life. Mud sucked at boots, icy wind cut through coats, and every sound, the distant crack of German artillery, the groan of a damaged tank, reminded them how impossible this task seemed. Yet Patton's presence instilled a sense of purpose. To him, terrain and logic were challenges to overcome, not barriers to halt action. This crossing would test more than engineering skill. It would challenge leadership, courage, and the very resolve of men who had already survived Normandy, the hedgerows of France, and the push through Lorraine. Every failed attempt could mean death or capture. Every success would cement Patton's reputation as a general who defied reason itself. The river waited, the men braced, and in the distance, German observers noted the Americans assembling, perhaps for the last time they believed an attack could be stopped. Yet Patton was already moving, already calculating, already defying the impossible. December 11, 1944. The Moselle River lay gray and relentless beneath a steel sky. Patton's engineers worked feverishly, assembling makeshift pontoons while soldiers watched from the muddy banks. The first tanks rumbled into position, their engines growling like caged beasts. Artillery fire echoed in the distance, a constant reminder that German defenders were alert, ready to punish any misstep. Patton rode along the line, observing every calculation, every hesitant glance. "They said it couldn't be done," he noted, his voice calm but resolute. The men knew his mind. There would be no retreat, no compromise. Every order, every motion was precise, choreographed to exploit the enemy's uncertainty. At 800 hours, the first Sherman tank splashed into the cold water. Engineers had reinforced the makeshift pontoons, but the current was strong. The tank pitched and tilted, nearly sliding into the deeper channels. Soldiers held their breath. German artillery spotted the movement and opened fire. Shells exploded in the water, sending plumes of mud and debris skyward. Yet the Sherman pressed forward. Behind it, infantry followed, crossing on narrow pontoon bridges. Engineers waded in freezing water, adjusting beams, securing cables, and guiding vehicles across. Each crossing was a gamble. One misstep could tear the bridge apart. One shell could cut the column in half. The air smelled of wet steel, smoke, and gunpowder. Every man knew the danger, yet moved with grim determination. By midday, a small but significant force had reached the far bank. Patton's audacity was paying off. German commanders were caught off guard. Artillery fire, precise but limited, could not stop the advancing Americans. Reconnaissance reported that the enemy was beginning to pull back, unsure if this was a feint or a full-scale crossing. Patton pressed forward, sending more tanks, more trucks, more men into the fray. The impossible was in motion. Every moment of fear, hesitation, and doubt dissolved under the roar of engines and the resolve of men who refused to let logic dictate their actions. By evening, the first wave had secured a foothold across the Moselle, a tenuous bridgehead that would expand under the cover of relentless determination. This was only the beginning. The river had been crossed, but the true challenge, the consolidation, the push forward, and the enemy's response was about to unfold. As the afternoon sun struggled through a gray December sky, Patton's forces pressed deeper onto the far bank of the Moselle. Sherman tanks, supported by half-tracks and jeeps, advanced in staggered formations, each vehicle a test of the makeshift pontoon's strength. Engineers shouted instructions over the roar of engines, guiding each crossing with tense precision. One misaligned plank, one loose cable, and the entire column could collapse into the icy river below. German artillery crews, positioned on high ground, attempted to repel the assault. Flashes of fire erupted along the hillsides. Shells exploded with thunderous force, sending water and debris cascading into the river. Infantry tried to take advantage of natural cover, picking off engineers and stragglers. Yet Patton's men pressed forward. Suppressive fire from American tanks and artillery blunted the German response. Smoke and dust masked movement, creating confusion among defenders. By late afternoon, a full regiment had crossed. What had seemed impossible hours earlier was now reality. German commanders, initially confident in the Moselle's natural defenses, found their assumptions shattered. Communications intercepted by Allied intelligence showed panic and uncertainty rippling through German lines. They had expected delay, attrition, or perhaps a cautious probe, not a full-scale crossing executed under heavy fire with rapid momentum. Patton, atop his staff car, surveyed the riverbank. The men were cold, exhausted, but alive, and most importantly, they held the ground. Orders were immediately given to expand the bridgehead, bringing in artillery, engineers, and supplies. Each reinforcement further secured the position, cementing the success of the audacious plan. By nightfall, the crossing was effectively complete. Bridges had been stabilized. Tanks and trucks transported supplies and reinforcements. The foothold on the far side of the Moselle allowed Patton's Third Army to resume its advance into the German-held territory of Lorraine. It was a testament to leadership, discipline, and the willingness to defy conventional logic. The impossible had been achieved. Engineers who had doubted, soldiers who had feared, and commanders who had hesitated now witnessed firsthand what audacity, planning, and relentless action could accomplish. Yet, this was only the start of the consequences, the aftermath that would echo through German lines and elevate Patton's legend in Allied history. The first light of December 12 revealed a transformed battlefield. Where a few hours earlier there had been only river, mud, and the impossible, Patton's Third Army now held a solid foothold across the Moselle. Tanks, artillery, and infantry moved with precision, consolidating positions on the far bank. Engineers worked tirelessly to strengthen pontoons and repair partial bridge sections, ensuring a steady flow of men and materiel. The air smelled of wet steel, smoke, and the lingering scent of gunpowder, a silent testament to the risks taken the day before. Casualties had been significant but manageable. Reports recorded 32 American soldiers killed during the initial crossing and over 120 wounded. German losses were heavier among the artillery crews defending the riverbank, with dozens of positions overrun by concentrated tank and infantry assaults. Every crossing was a calculated gamble. Some vehicles were lost to misjudged currents or artillery strikes, yet the operation had succeeded where logic had predicted failure. Success reverberated through Patton's ranks. Morale surged. Soldiers who had questioned the feasibility of the operation now understood the audacity behind their commander's decision. Letters and reports from field units described a mix of relief and awe, capturing moments of exhaustion quickly replaced by determination. Patton himself circulated among the troops, calm but meticulous, ensuring every unit knew its role in expanding the bridgehead. His leadership had transformed fear into action. German commanders, meanwhile, struggled to respond. Intercepted communications revealed frustration and confusion. Units intended to halt the Americans at the river were already being outflanked. The sudden, rapid crossing forced a recalibration of defensive plans, delaying counterattacks and leaving gaps that Patton's mechanized forces could exploit in the following days. The psychological impact was clear. The Germans had believed the river would slow or even halt the Third Army. Patton's decision had shattered that assumption, and the ripple effects spread through the enemy's command. Supply lines began to stabilize by nightfall. Engineers worked to construct more permanent bridge sections, allowing heavier tanks and artillery to cross safely. Field hospitals moved forward, tending to the wounded and ensuring combat effectiveness was maintained. By the end of the day, the riverbank had been transformed from an obstacle into a staging ground for continued offensive operations, a symbol of audacity, discipline, and precision. The Moselle crossing had not only succeeded in physical terms, but had sent a clear message. Patton's Third Army would take risks others deemed impossible, and the cost of underestimating him could be catastrophic. Yet, this was only the beginning of the broader consequences. The next days would reveal how the Germans adapted, how Allied strategy shifted, and how the psychological shock of defying the impossible would echo far beyond a single river. By December 13, the full scope of Patton's daring crossing had begun to reshape the battlefield. The Third Army was no longer stalled by natural barriers. The Moselle had been conquered. German commanders, initially confident in the river's defensive power, now faced the stark reality that their assumptions were obsolete. Units that had been positioned to delay Patton were suddenly outmaneuvered. Counterattacks were rushed, uncoordinated, and ultimately ineffective, as the Americans exploited the bridgehead with tanks, artillery, and infantry in rapid succession. The psychological effect on both sides was profound. For American soldiers, the impossible had become real. Letters from the front describe exhausted men marveling at what had been achieved, while their trust in leadership, particularly in Patton, deepened. Engineers who had initially warned against the crossing now worked with renewed determination, taking pride in the structures that had enabled history. Every successful crossing reinforced the sense that audacity, discipline, and calculated risk could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. German morale, by contrast, began to falter. Reports intercepted by Allied intelligence revealed confusion, fear, and incredulity among officers. One communication from a German field commander read, "The Americans move where no man should tread. The river no longer protects us. We must fall back to preserve our forces." The crossing shattered not only physical defenses, but also the psychological barrier that had anchored German strategy. The belief in natural or fortified lines as impenetrable defenses had been decisively undermined. Strategically, the successful crossing accelerated the Third Army's advance into Lorraine. Towns previously considered contested or defended were now vulnerable. Patton could press the attack before the Germans had a chance to regroup, turning what would have been a cautious, delayed advance into a momentum-driven push. Intelligence reports later confirmed that several German units were redeployed hastily to counter the bridgehead, leaving gaps elsewhere in their lines that Allied forces exploited in the following weeks. The crossing also solidified Patton's reputation among Allied commanders. Eisenhower and other senior leaders recognized that the audacity of such operations could shorten campaigns, seize strategic opportunities, and demoralize the enemy. Newspapers, correspondence, and post-war analyses later celebrated the feat, often emphasizing that the bridge over the Moselle had been impossible in every sense of the word, until Patton made it possible. By nightfall, the river was no longer an obstacle but a symbol of leadership that defied conventional wisdom, of men willing to confront fear head-on, and of a general whose vision could turn the impossible into reality. The Third Army had not only crossed a river, it had crossed a threshold of audacity that would echo throughout the remainder of the European campaign. The Moselle crossing was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a demonstration of leadership, courage, and the human capacity to overcome the seemingly impossible. Patton's decision to ignore conventional warnings was not reckless, it was calculated audacity. He understood the terrain, the enemy, and his men, and he leveraged all three to transform risk into opportunity. For the soldiers on the banks, the memory of freezing water, roaring engines, and exploding shells became a testament to resilience. Engineers who had doubted themselves discovered ingenuity under pressure. Infantry who had feared the crossing found confidence in shared purpose. In that moment, human will proved as decisive as tanks or artillery. The operation also sent a clear message across the European theater. Rigid assumptions could be shattered, and initiative could redefine a campaign. German commanders learned too late that natural obstacles were no substitute for vigilance, flexibility, or morale. Patton's audacity imposed a psychological weight as heavy as any artillery barrage, forcing the enemy to react and adapt under pressure. Historically, the crossing exemplifies a broader truth about warfare. Bold decisions, taken with awareness of risk and capability, can change the course of events. It reminds us that strategy is not only about maps and numbers. It is about human judgment, courage, and the willingness to defy expectation. And yet, the story is quietly human. Men on both sides confronted fear, exhaustion, and the stark reality of death. Their choices, their discipline, and their endurance created the conditions for history. Patton's leadership illuminated what was possible when vision met action, and left a legacy that continues to inspire military strategy and leadership studies to this day. The Moselle River, once an obstacle, became a symbol of audacity and calculated risk. In the frozen waters of December 1944, the impossible was crossed, not by machines alone, but by men daring to act when others said it could not be done.